And of course, because each of these stones, as you can see, as mesh smoothing applied to it, the polygon count in our scene will be high, and of course, it will slow down our rendering time unnecessarily. So here's what we need to do. We are going to select the asteroid, and then we go to edit. Let's go to the beginning. Go to edit, clone, make a copy of it, call it, let's rename it, of course, to debris. Okay. And then let's move it to the sideline, or even to somewhere like that, or just somewhere where it's a bit out of view. Okay. And of course, we're going to delete the mesh smoothing from it. And then open up the particle flow window, shape instance. Instead of asteroid, we're going to pick, of course, debris, just like that. Okay, as you can see now, it picks up debris. And then the debris itself shouldn't be renderable. We only want the particles. So this object, we're going to right click, select object properties, and then uncheck renderable, so that of course it does not render in the scene. Okay. And then of course, now when we play back, you can see the stones are still there. Okay. Of course, but they no longer contain mesh smoothing. Okay. They're more or less rough. Okay. Then this object of ours, I think something I just need to reduce, let me see, the vertices. No, it's not a problem at all. Let me just confirm something. Yeah, so basically we've told them to render the debris particles, okay, not the asteroid particles anymore. Yeah, this is a proper setup. As you can see, of course, everything is coming behind, as our stone is making its way through the galaxy. Now, at this point, it's all looking good. And if you go to rendering, render, and then you hit the render button, can you see what kind of scene that we're having right now? It's looking like this right now because, of course, it does not have proper materials. So we're about to turn this into materials. Okay, here we go. I'm going to start with the fire materials, of course. So open up the material editor by going to rendering, material editor. Select any empty slots, and we're going to rename this here to fire. Okay. And then to make sure that we're all working on the same things, we're going to double click the material so that of course you can see it in the scene for yourselves. Okay. Now, first things first, we're going to reduce its opacity a bit because it's a bit too much in the scene, but maybe we'll reduce the opacity later. Instead, let's give it that orange color that all fires tend to have. So we do that by clicking on the spectacular map, and then we're going to select to find or to create a nice orange material. So for the red color, we're going to enter the 255. For the blue, you'll enter 167. I'm doing this so that we all have the same, exactly the same results, okay? And for the blue, we'll enter 73. Yeah. That way, you can't write me an email saying, hey, Henrythejedi, how come my materials look more red than orange, you know? By me showing you these coordinates, I know for sure that we are getting exactly the kind of orange that we want to get. So click on that and then hit close. And it has to be glossy a bit. So we're going to push the specular level up a bit, as you can see me doing. Yeah, up to 180 is fine. And the glossiness as well needs to be brought up about 50 or 51. Okay. Now I need to warn you guys that the results of our fun animation really rest upon how we do our materials and if we do them well. In other words, we cannot afford to fail here. Okay, so we have to, that's why we're taking this quite seriously. Now, the next thing is, remember, this is a fire-based animation, and we all know fire doesn't stay the same. It's procedural, okay? Like it has life. It's dynamic. So what we need to do then is for the diffuse slot here, click on the diffuse channel. We are going to load particle age, okay? It's a kind of material that will enable it to have that dynamic feel, okay? Now in here we're going to determine what is the color of the fire when it starts. So that's why we have the color number 1, number 2, and number 3. This enables us to determine the starting color of the fire until of course the fire reaches the end of its lifespan. Okay, so for the first color we want the fire to start at a nice orange. So for the red we are going to enter 255. For the green we'll give it 132. And for the blue we leave it at 0. So that's the kind of orange that we want to get. Okay, yeah. And then the next color here, color number 2, will still be in the range of the oranges. So for the red we are going to enter 255, and for the green we're going to enter 156, and for the blue we'll leave it at 0. Okay, so it's again it's a color in the range of other oranges or slightly yellow. Okay, and then finally for the color number 3, so as you can see, of course, color number 3 will need to be the color of the fire at its most intense level. In other words, we are talking now red, because when something glows it tends to glow red. And in here the red value will be 252. For the green we'll leave it at 0, and for the blue we'll leave at 0. That's of course how we get that nice bright red color. Okay. So please observe again, that's the color of the fire when it starts, halfway through its life, and finally the fire really becomes red. Okay, so let's go up. Now if we were to apply this to our material, it will look good, but it's not exactly what we want, because it has to have some kind of adjustable opacity. So we come here to the opacity option. We're going to reduce the opacity. In other words, how much is the fire visible? We're going to reduce it to 5 units, then hit enter. That way of course it's really transparent mostly. Okay, and that's exactly of course what we want. Okay. So basically all we have is something done there in the diffuse map where we added particular edge, and of course the specular level is a little orange color. Now of course this means nothing unless you apply it of course to our particle system. So open up the particle flow. Now remember, fire is a dynamic particle system. So here's what we're going to do. Let me maximize this. We're going to drag a material dynamic, that is material dynamic operator, because of course this is an animated thing. Fire is animated, and then we're going to drag it there, all the way there. Okay, below the render for the PF source 01 fire. Drag it there. There it is. And also we're going to drag of course material dynamic. Let's see, for which other one? Let's see. Yeah, this one here. Okay, for the fire around the stone. In fact, we need to rename this to fire around stone, not fire around smoke. Okay, that was my mistake. Okay, now of course it waits. What material does it want to take? So we click here, material dynamic. Remember, we have the material editor open. As you can see, of course, we are at the top of the material tree for the fire, and then we're going to drag this material here, drag it to this slot here, right there, and assign material, make it an instance, and then hit OK. That way of course this material here will actually be applied to our fire particles. And also of course it needs to come here. We're going to drag this material here to this slot here, make an instance as well. Okay, now we're going to do a test render. Press F9 or hit the little teapot there to check for yourselves. Now it's creating the render of course. Now 3D Max is busy rendering. As you can see of course it's looking very interesting. So whatever you see there in red, or those bubbles, are actually the fire particles coming out. Okay, now of course you can see that it's looking all fishy, but don't worry, we are still in progress. Okay, so I still want to adjust the parameters according until we are happy with the results. Let me just try and make my render window a bit bigger here, so that of course next time I try to hit render you guys can see what we are doing. Maybe I'm gonna push mine maybe to 900 or so. just to create something to fill up the screen, really. Yeah, so really this is what we are having right now. Okay, so the little glowing spheres are the fire particles, and as I said, we are still working on this. We are going to adjust the parameters until we get the results that we're looking for. Okay, now back to the particle flow window. Now the next thing we need to do is that to help our scene look a bit better, we're going to do the following. Using the power of 3D Max's motion blur, we will be able to create better looking results without doing much tweaking. And here's what needs to happen. We'll start here at the top of the tree here of the particle flow window. We are going to right click on this particle properties, and then we are going to, as you can see, of course, it already has motion blur option enabled, but that means nothing, okay, because we still have to do something. Okay, now we're going to come here under event 01. Now this is where things begin to happen. We're going to right click here and object properties. Now here we're going to force 3D Max to apply motion blur image mode with a multiplier of just 0.7. In other words, 3D Max will begin to blur the fire particles as they're coming out of here depending on the speed at which they're traveling. Of course, the faster the particles, the more blurry they will look. Okay, so we have image, motion blur turned on. Make sure you check that option, and of course, we reduce the setting to 0.7 units. The same thing, of course, needs to happen to those ones. Image 0.7. Okay. And then we also come here, right click, object properties, make sure it's image motion blur, turn it back to 0.7. And by the way, I think the fire around the stone here doesn't need motion blur. Just right click, select object properties. Yeah, we're going to uncheck the motion blur option. Okay, just uncheck it, make it none. Okay, because the fire around the stone don't actually need motion blur. It's just these ones here that do need it. Okay, so it's that and this. Okay, now of course we have to do a test. Preview this. Let's see what happens right now. You'll notice when you render this, what happens. So 3D Max first renders the scene, and then it applies, of course, motion blur to the particles. As you can see, of course, they're blurred because, of course, they're traveling at a high speed. And of course, that's exactly what we want. Okay, never mind the fact that it looks a bit weird. That's because you're looking at it quite close up. Let's see. Let's have a shot from here at a distance, that is. Now, of course, you can see how things are looking from a distance, and I must say, of course, it's looking good so far. A bit weird, but still looking good. Okay. Yeah. Back to the particle flow. The one thing is that we did not blur the we did not blur the fire around the smoke because we still want, those little spheres sticking out, because they act as tendrils, like those little fire particles are just coming out of the animation. Okay, if you blur them as well, I can assure you the results won't look. Up next is the smoke particles. Okay, first things first, we're going to change the display here to ticks. Okay, the smokes are the yellow particles in the scene. And of course, we need to create a material slot for them. Select any empty slot and rename that to smoke. Of course, you're going to drag it there. Sorry, we have to add a material, and so we have to drag, of course, a material dynamic below the smoke there. And of course, we're going to drag our smoke layer there. Make an instance, of course. Okay, and then of course we're going to play around with the smoke particles. We're going to increase the glossiness to something a bit high, something like 100. And then for the smoke, the funny thing is that everything needs to be controlled just by the opacity map. So we're going to click here on the opacity. Okay, now smoke is a very dynamic and quite an interesting material, and we're going to use a mask material for it. As you can see, of course, mask enables us to have two materials to be doing things under one material slot, because one material actually needs to control the appearance of the smoke material. okay, and the other one actually controls the way it appears in the animation, because remember, smoke and fire are both dynamic materials. Okay, so first things first, let's control the appearance of the material. So for the map slot, click on it and we're going to load a gradient. You see that gradient? Now in here we're going to change first the gradient type to a radial material. Okay, now the darker areas control from where the materials actually are transparent. But for the smoke material, the only thing that we need to adjust is to turn it radial and then to adjust its noise parameters. Because remember, it's smoke. It's not a fine particle. It has a little bit of details here and there, and that is controlled through the noise parameters. For the amount, we'll set it to 0.25. You can see, of course, what's happening now. By doing that, of course, the material now looks a bit cold or rough. And then we are going to push its size up a bit to something like 3.5, okay? Just to make it a bit slightly fine, okay? Then let's go up. And of course, in here, for the mask, we need to do something. Remember, the mask helps us animate the smoke material quite well. So for the mask, we are going to load particle age, like we did for the fire. Now, what is the color of the smoke that we want at its beginning? Well, in the beginning, we want the smoke to be kind of whitish in color. Then the only other thing to change is the color number 3. This has to be completely black. Okay, so that will control, of course, the ages of the smoke. As you can see, the age number 1 is set at 0, the second one is 50, and the last one is at 100. That's a proper way to place them. That's all good, and then we go up to the parent and then up again. So this is the material 3. Now, the most important thing about the smoke material is that it should be faceted. So, it shouldn't be faceted, but it should be a face map. So we come here under shader basic parameters, turn on face map. By doing that, of course, can you see what it does? It makes the material look like that, okay? And I believe you can even make it two-sided if you choose to. The other thing is we're going to turn the opacity here to 0, okay? And then we click on extended parameters, or no, click on the maps option. Yeah, under maps here, we don't want the smoke to be too visible, so we're going to reduce the opacity all the way to 40%. That way it's slightly visible, and that's exactly how we want it. Okay, and then the other thing, of course, is to open up the particle flow window, and for the smoke, oh yeah, it's already updated. We already added that there. Okay, now if we click a preview here, you can see, of course, already that some materials or some particles already begin to take the shape of what they ought to be eventually, which is the smoke particles, but they don't appear very well. So we need to adjust that. To do that, we are going to force the materials to render well according to the camera they're looking at. So while we are in this view here, in the perspective view, I believe this is a nice view to render from. We'll go to views, and then we're going to select create camera from view, or Control C. That way, of course, we now have a camera right now that we can use to zoom and so forth. Okay, now let's open up the particle flow window, and now of course we're going to force the smoke materials to render properly because the camera is looking at them. To do that, we're going to drag what 3D Max calls shape facing. In other words, 3D Max will render particles according to what the objects are looking at, according to what the particles are looking at, and of course it has to be a camera. So we're going to drag that over there above the delete operator, shape facing. In other words, of course, you have to delete the shape operator that was there before. From here, we're going to click on the none button, and from the list, of course, we're going to pick camera 01. Okay, and then we have to adjust its parameters a bit, and that is we're going to adjust the size of the particles to 20 units. Now, of course, let's render this in camera 01. But just by doing that, can you see, of course, now the smoke looks more puffy, and that's, of course, exactly the way it's supposed to look, simply because we have the camera operator. You see that? Now, of course, it's looking very good. Okay, And now is the turn to texture our stone particle. Okay, the asteroid that is. Select it and then let's bring up the material editor. Let's rename this of course to Asteroid. Assign to the object. Let's bring up a specular level a bit. Because so that it can be just a bit shiny. Okay. And then for the diffuse map, we are going to load a smoke particle. Sorry, smoke material. If you notice well, of course, we did not bother to use this material on the smoke particles, no, because they don't always produce the results that you might want. Okay. Yeah. Anyways, sit in the viewport. Yeah. Let's adjust its parameters. We're going to increase its size a bit, to something a bit higher. Just to make it more interesting. Yeah. And we'll also give it some bumpiness because it's a rock. So click on the maps option and then we're going to drag the smoke to the bump slot. Make it an instance, please. And then we need to reduce it a bit, maybe to something really low to make it really rough. Even lower. Yeah, maybe something like minus 600 and something or so. Okay. Yeah, like that. So you can see, of course, it's a rough rock now. Now, this will not render well unless, of course, you apply UVW map. So let's add a UVW map to it. Make it spherical. Okay. So that it surrounds the stone completely. My PC froze a bit there because it was updating things a bit. Just zoom in a bit here. Yeah, and let's go to the diffuse slot. As you can see, of course, the material is visible in the viewport. Now the same thing needs to be done. The same material needs to be done, of course, with the debris as well. So select the debris material. Assign them the texture as well. You can see, of course, now even the debris particles have, of course, been updated. And of course, we have to add a UVW map that came from here. Right click, copy, and right click and paste instanced. That, of course, they all have that same particles, those same particle or UVW mapping settings. Okay. Just see. Yeah, of course, render this to see. Can you see, of course, how much more interesting now the scene is looking? You see that, eh? Wow, brilliant, eh? And by the way, I forgot to show you. You see at the top here, there's an option there in 3D Max that says display alpha channel right at the top there. Okay, click on it. Can you see, of course, the interesting details that the alpha channel layer is revealing to us? So you can just turn it on or off just to see, of course, what's cooking. But I must say this is looking brilliant. Okay. Now, if we ever try to come here and enter the, let's see, if we decide to jump to frame 250 there, you're going to see what happens now in the scene. As you can see at the bottom there, 3D Max tells you that it's busy updating the particle system, 47%. That's because there are a lot of particles in the scene, so 3D Max needs to update them. And I'm going to pause the tutorial and then join you back when it gets there. Just a few minutes. Whew, yeah, it finally made it. It just took what, roughly 2 minutes or so. Now you can see, of course, for yourselves just how epic, just how, dramatic things are looking right now. So this is how big our scene actually is when we see it from up here. Scene is very big. As you can see, of course, it becomes a bit slow when we try to move things about. Okay. Now, of course, you have to create a preview. Mine over here took roughly 2 minutes and 42 seconds. Again, that's because, of course, there are now more particles visible in the scene. And I must say, whoa, it's looking fantastic. Trust me, you won't believe what happens when we take it actually for post-production in After Effects. That way we can actually control how much glowing is happening here and there. Okay. The next thing that we need to do now is the following. Let's just go to the beginning here. We're going to create a universe, of course, for all this to happen, because I mean this can't just be happening in a vacuum or in an empty space. We need a universe. And what better way to create a universe than by having stars, of course. So here's what we need to do. We're going to go to the create panel, select particle systems, PF source, and just draw one out like that. Rename it, of course, to universe. Okay. Open up the particle view window. And here's what needs to happen. Okay, there it is. We're going to go to the birth and reduce the image stop here to 0, so that it only creates particles once. And if we scrub through, you see that they remain there. Okay. Now, how many particles? Well, how about 3,000 particles? You see that? Great. Now, of course, the number of particles simply means how many stars will actually be there in our galaxy or in our universe. Let's see the position icon. Well, the particles must stick to where they're coming from the emitter. So turn on lock on emitter. That way, of course, when you scrub through, you see that they simply maintain their position. Okay. They don't need any speed because they're standing still. Yeah, a bit of rotation will help. And the shape they can have can just be a cube. Okay. The size, well, just leave it at 1 unit. Okay. For the display, yeah, they can remain as sticks. Just make it a very light blue color like that so that we can see it in the scene, of course. Now, it's actually emitting particles, but the problem is that they're all locked up in that area. We're going to right click on the camera label, change the views to perspective. That, of course, we can easily zoom in and zoom out. Now, here's what we need to do. We need to stretch out the particle flow of the universe here so that it really surrounds the complete scene. To do that, we come here to the particle. We're going to change the icon type into a box. Okay. And now we are going to adjust its properties. As you can see, we are stretching out the length. In fact, the best thing to do is to come up here. It needs to be very long because it has to surround, of course, the entire universe here. It really has to look like it's infinite, without any boundaries, just as, of course, the real universe might look like. That's why we're stretching it out. And of course, move it to 0 inch on the x-axis. Yeah, of course, it also has to be spread wider. And I mean really wide. Okay. So that's what it's looking like, right? And then after having done that, it also has to be tall. So we're increasing the height. And we need to push the height quite a lot, I must say. Okay. Yeah. So you can see, of course, from this view, just what we are cooking, really. That way, of course, at no point can people actually see that our universe stops anywhere. Okay. So again, we are spreading it very long, increasing the length, and again increasing the width, of course. Yeah. Now when we are here, can you see, of course? You can see, of course, what we have now. Ah, no, it's still too thin. Okay. So here's what we need to do. Of course, push up the height even further. And again, the length. And again, the width. You see that? That really creates a big expansion. You see that? Sorry. Just redo that. Let's change the view here to camera. Let's tell our camera here to zoom out a bit. Let's see whether we can pick any star. Yes, we can, depending, of course, on how we rotate. Okay. Perhaps it's a bit too stretched out. So I'm going to do this. Reduce the width a bit. Okay, the height is alright. Yeah, that way, of course, we still have, you know, some stars in the scene that we can look at. You see that, eh? Yeah, great. Try to render this right now. You can see, of course, what you're having. Of course, stars do not appear because they need a material a bit. So